Welcome back to another edition of the Quarantine Q&A here on the Westmoreland Sports Network as we talk to local athletic directors at the high school level. I'm Sean Myers, joined by Dan Flickinger, and today our guest is the 10th year athletic director from Southmoreland, Charlie Swink. Charlie, thank you for taking the time. Glad to talk to you, although it's under less than ideal circumstances. How have you been doing?
Good, real good. Making the best of what we can do here. I really was looking forward to a spring season here at Southmoreland, but we'll do what we got to do and move forward.
A decade for you as athletic director for the Scotties. Take us through your background, what led up to ultimately getting that position as AD.
Well, I worked at originally I graduated from Connellsville High School, obviously, but I had some college athletics, and then I ended up working at UPS. I was there for 23 years. I was a business manager. I moved around, did quite a things, and an opportunity came over here. My old equipment manager when I was in high school was the superintendent at Southmoreland, and they had an opening. It was for a part-time AD. I talked to him, and I thought, well, you know what, maybe I could do that while I was still working at UPS. Did do that for a year, and very difficult, obviously, but I found out that I enjoyed it, and I was at the stage of my career at UPS. I had to make a decision on whether I was going to stay there or move on, and I really enjoyed being around the kids, and I realized how much I missed sports, and he gave me that opportunity. There it went into the next year. I was offered as a transportation director, AD, and transportation was pretty much the full-time opportunity, and I've been here ever since, and really enjoy it.
I know that it's always interesting when you go through a year. There's high points and low points. I would suspect in your 10 years that this past school year has been one of the best, though, and we're going to focus on a lot of those great accomplishments. But I think the biggest story, you have to start with football, because that was the talk of the entire WPIAL in the fall. The playoff drought was finally snapped. 40 years of history in which Southmoreland had not been in the playoffs. That ended, and it really was a incredible, surreal experience, and Dan and I were there for the great game against McGuffey. Ultimately, the Scotties came up short. But what was that ride like for the 2+ months in the fall with the football team?
Well, it was obviously it was unbelievable, and it was a lot of fun. I think our community really stepped up. I think they were hungry for that for many, many years. The support we got, from the fans to, like you said, people around the WPIL. I think everybody just wanted to see us be successful and break that trend, and the kids really stepped up on it. They had that goal from the beginning of the year. Dave Kiefer, when he took over, that was the one thing we talked about. And, he's an alumni here and went to school here, and he was tired of hearing about it too. And I think he was a big part of it. He motivated those kids. He got them in the weight room. Every day they talked about, breaking the streak. At the end of practice, that's what they, broke on. And it was a lot of fun. And I hope moving forward, I think these kids now realize, winning's fun, and it's a good time, but you got to put a little work towards it, and I think that's what Days brings to the program. And like I said, I was just really happy for the community. It was a lot of fun through the fall. I mean, we had packed houses every night.
Well, you talked about Coach Kiefer. He's one of the guys that Sean and I enjoy talking to the most. I don't think I've ever seen a guy with that much energy. Not many can match his level.
You got that right. Even with me, sometimes when he comes in here, he's like, he stepped back a little bit with Dave, because, when he's got his focus and he wants something done, he goes after it. And that's part of, it was funny when I first came here years and years ago, I had talked to him about being a coach back then, and there was just other things on his plate at the time. And, he had things going on. He just wasn't ready. And I laugh about that now. I said, we may have been able to do this a few years ago had you just taken that job. But I think and I'm hoping he's happy now, and I really look for successful things from him.
Charlie, he seems to be the perfect coach to have in place for some smaller schools that are battling to get more kids out to play football. Someone with that constant motor, that constant energy level. I'm sure the kids really respond to that. Have you seen the numbers start gradually moving up here?
Oh, yeah. From one point we were down to almost 20-some kids, and, he over the last couple of years, he's got well up over 30, and I think moving forward, we're looking at our spring this year when they were talking about it, maybe upwards of 50 kids. And
wow.
And, that's always your goal. Ideally, we would always said we'd like to have 10 per class. That's like 40 kids. And if you come out of the season with 40 kids, that's a pretty good number. But one thing with Dave being in school, He's in the class, walking the halls, and he sees kids. He talks to them, like you said. He keeps them motivated. And one thing, some of his colleague teachers beside him, that's one nice thing too, because now they're starting to recruit kids to play or tell Dave. They're all in it together. I think the school really getting that point where the coaches are all supporting each other and trying to get. If they got a good athlete that plays, wrestles, maybe we push them to play football. That's starting to happen.
Well, that game against McGuffey, and as Sean mentioned, we were there broadcasting, and I'll never forget the atmosphere. And I know it ended up going as a loss, but it was a great game through 3 quarters until McGuffey ran away with it there in the 4th with a couple of touchdowns. But the atmosphere was amazing. And I remember being in the press box, and I think it was your PA announcer that said, "We have never seen something like this in decades," or whatever it was. How fondly will you think back to that game? And I'm sure you're hoping that there's going to be more of those next year and in the years to come now with more kids getting involved. But just thinking back to that game, even though it was a loss, you have to think about it fondly with how the community showed up.
Oh, yeah, it was, like you said, the atmosphere was just unbelievable. It was like a huge playoff game almost, and it was the stands were packed from McGuffey's crowd being there to our crowd. And like we said in the press box, there was no room for anybody up there. We had all the press, barring a couple mistakes at the end there that kind of, threw us into where we got caught or got behind a little bit. It was a great game, and kids played hard, and they played up till the end. And I think that's where a lot of our kids in our community start seeing, those are the kind of games you want to play in. That's what you work for, from midgets clear up through, the junior high to play in those kind of varsity games. And it was exciting. I'm hoping, like you said, that goes on in the future.
The press box is terrific at Russ Grimm Stadium, but it's a field that rarely you see that caliber of a football stadium for a smaller high school, a team that competed in 2A last year. How much of a benefit is that for the Scotties to have that facility?
We're very fortunate. We're proud of it. And a lot of times when teams come in, it's a great place to play. It's a great place to watch the game where you're on it. You can see everything happening because we don't have the track around it. So you're right on the field. Our kids love playing here, and, it just gives us some pride to say this is our home. And, we try to treat everybody good when they come in, but when we're on the field, that's what I told them. You can be a gentleman off the field, but when you're on the field, you tear their head off and hand it to them. But when you're done, you shake hands and you move on. And that's kind of how we look at our house. We look at that place as being our place, and we're proud of it. And it's a great field to play. And we're real fortunate the community supported us and gave us that kind of facility to play in.
It was a team that competed in 2A, as I mentioned, last year, finally getting into the playoffs. It'll be a different challenge next year because the Scotties moving up to 3A. What do you anticipate in terms of the challenges and maybe some of the benefits that might come from moving up as well?
It's going to be a challenge, but again, a lot of the teams we're playing are old familiar foes, a lot of them, and I think talking to Dave, he's actually excited about it. He feels he has just as good a chance in this conference of, making the playoffs and doing some damage as he did in the other one. McGuffey and Washington and all those, they're no pushovers. And now we're back in with some of our rivals, like we said, Mount Pleasant, York. We got Brownsville still in there that we played, and some of the other teams, EF. So it'll be, good games and teams that we're familiar with. And Dave, like you said, is real excited to be in this conference. And I think you're going to see some big crowds again because, again, we got some of our rivals back in there, and we're looking forward to it. I think our kids are ready, and they're excited about being in a different conference, and they just want to make a mark here too.
And Mount Pleasant was your Week 0 opponent. Your new Week 0 opponent is McGuffey. Very interesting.
Yeah, it was me and Dave sat down and talked about that. I wasn't, just like you said, McGuffey's a tough team. Ed Dalton's a great coach. But, a couple of years ago when Dave took over, he said he wanted to play Mount Pleasant. And I was like, well, I don't know if we want to play Mount Pleasant. We should play somebody else. But he was adamant about it. And he did, 2 years in a row, had a great game and won that game. And so I said, you know what, Dave, you were right. Last couple of years, we're going to follow what you say. And we called up Ed, and Ed wanted to play too. He likes coming out here. And obviously we like playing them. They're a class act, and they were up for it. And I guess their stadium hopefully will be open, and that'll give our kids an opportunity to play on a new field too. So we're excited about it. But like I said, McGuffey's a tough game, and I hope Dave's ready.
That brings up the question about the debate that raged a handful of months ago when there were a few different proposals for the football realignment, and it really would have carried over to all sports, but the focus was on football. It was the classification versus the geographic debate. I know that a lot of ADs said there were some pros to each proposal. Ultimately, they stayed pretty similar with the classifications. They made some adjustments, of course, to the non-conference. Did you have a strong opinion one way or the other, and how did you react to what ultimately was enacted?
We kind of like the classification. We were looking at some of the teams that, as far as geographic, we would have been playing. They had us on their sheet, and we'd have been playing some pretty big schools. I think we could have handled them. But at the same time, I kind of like the classification. Dave liked the classification. So we were happy with the way it came out. And looking, like I said, the way we ended up, we're pretty happy. So traveling's not too bad. Teams we kind of know, and a lot of them's our rivals. So we were happy with the way it turned out.
Talking to Charlie Swink, athletic director at Southmoreland. It was a historic season for football. It was a historic season for girls basketball as well. Undefeated in the regular season, the Scotties make it to the WPIAL championship game, also make the first ever state basketball appearance. Take me through that roller coaster ride.
Well, that was a real ride. We started the season off with high expectations. We knew we had a pretty good nucleus, pretty good team coming back. Our seniors were strong. They had played a lot of time, and a couple good freshmen. We had, Olivia Sanudo is our guard now, and she's a great athlete. And Gracie Spadero, just another, we just had some great athletes. So when we started out the season and just kept going on as winning, we had some setbacks a little bit with Kelsey Coons leaving us and going to GCC. She was a great player, but the girls stepped up and just continued without a missing a beat. So when we got into that later in the season with that, undefeated season going, the pressure that was on them, that the girls just handled it, and I couldn't be more prouder of them. Winning a section was something that we wanted to do. We haven't done that here in a long time. I think the last time they won a section was when Vanessa Abel was here in like 2007. And they were just this group of girls is just like the football team. When I watched them, they were just together. They supported each other, and the senior leadership was unbelievable. Sarah Pasula, she was a underneath leader of the team, and Charity Henderson, Shabandi, and just all of them. I mean, it was a joy to watch them play. And then when we got into the playoffs, Bryan come up to me and he told me all year, he said, "I think we can go to Pete." I said, I'd like nothing better than to see that. And when we got into that first playoff game down in Peters Township with Freeport, we had played them earlier in the year, and obviously they were missing a couple girls, and you could tell the difference. They had their mind set on upset too, and they were a great team, but our girls held out, and that's when I knew I think we can do this. And Bryan said the same thing, and when we played the second game against Central Valley and got into the Pete, it was just a lot of fun. And there again, you talk about our community. If you look at our bleachers and our fans that came, we were stacked house everywhere we went, and that's a lot of pride even as an AD too. And I know the girls really appreciated the way the community come out. And, it was a lot of fun. I was disappointed we didn't get that championship, but I think the team we played, there's no shame in losing. I always tell those girls, if you go out or any sport and we play, you walk on that court, field, whatever it may be, and you do your best you can, and you come out not winning, it doesn't turn out the way you want, you can walk off your head up because you did your best, and I think that's what our girls did. And I was really truly proud of them. I was really proud of Bryan. He took his program over 8 years ago, and we were struggling tremendously, and took it from the basement up to where we were, in the Peterson Center with playing for a championship. So I'm going to miss him, and I think you haven't seen the last of him. I'm sure he'll be around with some other things, but he really was an inspiration to the kids, the program, and the community. I wish him well.
We'll talk about Bryan a little bit more in depth momentarily, but I want to get your perspective on the team playing at the Pete, because win or lose, it seems like it's an experience that everyone involved will never forget. And I talked to athletes a decade removed from when they played in a championship game, and they always talk about that atmosphere, and when they walk out there, it's something that they'll never forget. Your reaction to that, what you saw from the players, the coaches, and everyone involved with Southmoreland in that experience?
It was just unbelievable. It was like you said, it's an experience of a lifetime. Our kids, our community, our school, everybody's going to have that memory, and we were just so proud of all the people. We had our side of our fans. There was just, I think most of Scottsdale was here, so it was like we had a huge following. The girls, they were just. You just can't explain how it is to play in a situation, an area in a facility like that, because it's just so nice. And, you don't realize how nice that facility is, but it's beautiful. And the girls just had a great time. And I think, like you said, we were hoping to win, but, North Catholic was a formidable opponent, and they're a very, very good team. I think they could have probably maybe even made a run or taken a state championship this year. They had some nice athletes, but we enjoyed it. We were happy to be there. I think the community was happy to be there. And, the biggest thing it did is make our kids understand we want to get back. And that's what I think, the younger kids that were there and our programs that are down in the rec leagues now, if you work hard and continue, and you can get an opportunity to do something like that. And like you said, it's something you'll remember the rest of your life.
Well, I'm sure you're hoping that it takes the same line as football, right? I mean, the younger kids see the football team doing what they're doing, and now the numbers are up. Girls basketball the same way. They get to the Peterson Event Center. I'm sure you're hoping that generates more girls coming out.
Oh, obviously, and just all sports. The more successful we are, football is a big one. It just seems like a lot of your sports follow you for football. But the more successful your program are, the more kids get involved, and then it just seems to keep snowballing from there. And that was my goal when we came here years ago. That one thing we wanted to do is be competitive and everything. And we had an idea. We set a goal for a couple things that I think we've reached, and we're pretty happy about it. Now it's just a matter of continuing to grow, and every time Scotty's come on the court, it's not going to be an easy game.
One of the other sports, Charlie, that has really been doing well under the leadership of Dan Boring is, of course, wrestling. They had another solid season last year. They continue to get better and better, and I think they had a full lineup, and we broadcast the match against Mount Pleasant, which was incredible, down 31-0 last year. I've never seen anything like it. They come back and beat Mount Pleasant, which was just huge for them. I know how excited those kids and the coaching staff was after that match. What have you seen from the wrestling program that kind of gives you hopes for the future?
I think Southmoreland's always kind of had a history, and pretty rich history of some wrestlers if you look over the years, but they never was really had that state championship till Jake Beistel stepped in there, and that was one of the other goals we had. We wanted to get a state champion wrestler, and Jake did that for us. And I think when Dan stepped in, we had Steve Santia here a few years ago, and he started that with some of the competition with the kids and pushing them. And then when Dan took over, you can see Dan's a younger man. He's very energetic. He's very involved with the younger kids, and I think that's what's going to be a big, program builder for him. He's kind of like Dave with his enthusiasm. He's one of these you got to kind of reel in and make sure he's stays on track of what he's doing, because he wants to do so much. And I think, with his leadership and what he's trying to do, if everything continues to work out for him, he's going to be, Southmoreland wrestling will be where it needs to be. Like you said, if he can field that full team and get some decent wrestlers, you can do some damage, especially in team wrestling. So we got to get a couple more kids. I think we got kids coming up in our junior Olympic program that are showing some real promise, and the biggest thing is keeping them wrestling. A lot of kids sometimes when they get to the high school decide they're not going to do it, and that's been a problem over here. And I think Dan's going to address that, and really is addressing it, and we keep those kids involved. And again, like you're saying, and we talked about, when you start winning, it's kids want to be a part of that. So I think Dan's got a good thing going, and I hope he keeps it up.
How important is that role, Charlie, for a coach to play in terms of building the programs that are not even in high school? Because you don't see it necessarily everywhere where a coach will take something like that on. And maybe even the younger coaches even more, because they have a little bit more time to really invest into the junior high programs in wrestling or football or whatever program you're talking about. How important is that?
Well, I think it's very important. I mean, I'm not saying that a coach needs to be there at every practice, and but I think even as you look at the people that are helping, like in midgets or junior high, they like to see a head coach there, and a lot of them want to just hear what he has to say, and if he directs them, I think that's where they keep the enthusiasm going. And a lot, how kids are, if they see the head varsity football or varsity wrestling coach come down for a couple times and talks to them or shakes their hands or watches a match, they're all about that. And I think sometimes practices, and especially wrestling's a mentally tough game too, man. It's a long season and what you got to do. And I think that they show that interest in the kids, and it keeps them interested. And I think Dan and Dave's the same way. Dave goes to a lot of the midget, practices. He goes to their banquets. He goes to their whatever it may be, just to show his face. And Dan's following in the footsteps, and you see the success. I mean, that's just, if you don't take part in it and you don't show an interest, you reap what you sow. And I think these guys are really into it, and I think you're going to see some great things from both of them.
We're talking about wrestling, and one of the unique stories on the wrestling team involves a freshman named Henry Miller. He was a pretty good competitor on the mat, but that was just one of two sports that he did in the winter. He also is a swimmer. Because Southmoreland does not have a swimming team, he competes independently, but he certainly represented the school well in those endeavors. How difficult is it to compete in two separate sports in the same season, and what stands out about Henry?
Well, Henry, there again is Dan. Dan, I think, talked to him about wrestling. He had never wrestled before. He was always a swimmer and some other things. And Henry came out, and if you'd watch him, it was, he was pretty funny. But from what I understand, and talking to his dad, even he loved it. Wrestling actually helped him swimming because he got himself stronger physically. The endurance of what he was training as a wrestler when he swam. His dad was like, he's picking up swimming all of a sudden because of wrestling. I think that's helping him. I said, I guarantee it's helping him. And, when he got in the pool, being physically stronger, because he was a smaller kid, he got himself in shape, and swimming this year, he just went on as a freshman, and he did very, very well. He was on his way to the state tournament. He placed down at the Whippeals enough to get there, and as a freshman, we were just looking forward to him getting up there. And obviously, a lot of times, just getting the experience in that environment is a big thing for him to move forward as he gets older, because he's only going to get stronger and better, and hopefully the nerves would have been out because he's been there. So we were kind of disappointed he didn't get the opportunity to try to compete up there and see what he could do, because I'll tell you one thing, he's a competitor. He doesn't like to lose. I've seen that even on the wrestling match, and I think Henry will be a swimmer you'll see in the next few years.
We will focus on the spring sports momentarily, but before we get that, I want to circle back to really both winter and fall sports with Bryan Pritz, because I was looking back. I didn't realize this until recently. I was looking at some of the articles I wrote about a decade ago. He was the Southmoreland football coach for a pretty nice period of time, but he's most well known recently for the work that he did with the basketball team there, making that run to the Pete. His resignation, you said maybe not the last time that we hear from him, but what he accomplished guiding both girls basketball and football at Southmoreland, he really has been a mainstay. What will you miss most about him, and what were his best qualities as a coach, regardless of what sport it was?
Well, if you know Bryan, and I'm sure you guys have talked to him several times, I mean, he's a good guy. And one thing about Bryan, and I tell these guys and everybody I talk, he bleeds red and black. I mean, he graduated from here. He has a complete invested interest in Southmoreland. He always wants to see the kids and the sports do well. It's very tough, like you said, to be a coach sometimes, as years go over and everybody, the expectations, but he's always put the kids first, and, whatever it took to make the kids better, if he could get them, when we talked about, equipment or things, he always knows what he's doing. He put a lot of time into the lower levels with the elementary kids. Of course, he is a elementary teacher now, so he's been following up and talking to those kids. He was in a junior high for a couple years, so he was working with all those kids. He actually was coaching basketball as girls basketball at the middle school level, so he did the middle school and high school. So he's going to be missed tremendously. And like I said, he's sticking around as the assistant AD right now. So I'll be leaning on him a little bit more since he's freed up, and I know he wants to be involved. But, to take a program where we were, and I think he did the same thing back in the years when he had Vanessa and they won that championship. He decided that he was going to commit to football because, football is a big, to coach that, you really want to be involved. I don't think he felt it was fair to do basketball and take away from one, so he committed to the football for several years. And then when all that changed, I talked to him, me and my principal and a couple others, asked him to take over that basketball, and he did. And obviously, we went from the basement up to the Pete, and that's a tribute to him. And like I said, I think he'll be around. He's got young ones now coming up. His children, are getting actively involved in sports, his boys. And I commend him for wanting to be there. I often talk about, even in my life with my son, when I worked, if you blink your eyes, you'd blow up before you, and you want to be a part of them, and I get that. So I wish him well.
And when we talk about the historic seasons in the fall and in the winter, it seemed like it was maybe going to be a really good spring as well at Southmoreland. I know certainly softball had really high expectations. This is a team that won a championship pretty recently, and it looks like the pieces were in place to potentially contend as well. Specific to softball initially, and then we'll get into more general the spring overall, how disappointing was it that you did not have the opportunity for your team to take the field?
Very disappointing. When we were coming through basketball and going into the spring, I was really excited about our softball team. And like you said, a lot of our spring sports, but I felt our girls had worked hard. They had worked all winter. I'd see them in here in the weight rooms, and they play on their travel teams. And just talking to them and talking to Coach Bunner, they were ready. I think last year they realized that they needed to do a little more, fundamental stuff because we got to that place where we played Avonworth, but we just missed it by, I think they went 9 innings and lost by a run there. That we get past that when we may have run a run for it again. But the girls were, it's very disappointing to me because, like I said, I really believe we could have done some damage, and I just miss seeing the girls play. I actually enjoy watching our girls softball team probably as much as anything. They go out there, they play hard, they practice hard, they're really into it. And not having that opportunity, especially some of our seniors that's been around for the last, how many years, I really think, not seeing them play again is disappointing to me, and I'm sure, as much to them. But, again, I wish them all luck, and I've talked to several of them and told them if they, ever need anything. One of my biggest regrets this year was not seeing them on that field.
And really, we've talked to so many athletic directors about high school wrestling and softball, because it seems like those two sports more than any other in Westmoreland County stand out. When you take the field as a softball team in Westmoreland County, the expectations are you're going to be a championship caliber team. To elevate to that level, what has it taken over the years for Southmoreland?
Well, I think a lot of it is, again, our community. Some of the parents and got their kids involved and took them to, like, a lot of you look at these teams now, all of them play fast pitch softball. And they play on these travel teams, and it's kind of funny because when we go to these tournaments, or well, really not tournaments, but our games, these girls all know each other when they play each other, so they've gotten to the point where our families and parents are taking them to, what they need to do to get better. And I think that's it. They play all year round. They play when they're young, and they play with other teams, and they get to see what it's like. So they understand what caliber you need to be at if you're going to be competitive. And even now in softball, you look, like you said, WPIL, Westmoreland County's got unbelievable teams. That's what they say. It's like the hotbed between, Southmoreland's been tough. Mount Pleasant's been very tough. York's been very tough. Penn Trafford, Hempfield. Latrobe, they're all just, everybody's in there. You play a Westmoreland County team now, it's going to be a tough game.
Yeah, it's definitely very exciting. And you mentioned, Charlie, that you certainly follow softball closely. You are on the committee, the steering committee there for softball. I want to ask you about Adeline Nicholson, if you follow her college career at all, because it was interesting. Sean recently put together a Westmoreland alumni Q&A with her in the last couple of weeks. And she initially went to Slippery Rock, and now she's playing at Morehead State, and she was hitting .436 before the season got canceled this year. So she went to a Division II school, hit around a little under 300, and then went to Morehead State, and she was just clubbing the softball this year. Have you followed her college career at all?
I try to catch up as much as I can. When she comes back in town here, I see her. She followed our basketball team and stuff, and I knew she was going to be a good one. She was always a competitor. And, her dad, Wes, was our coach for a while, too. He helped Todd a couple years ago before we hired Chris. Mm-hmm. And she was just always an outstanding competitor, would do whatever we needed to do, pitch, play first. And she was always an outstanding hitter. And I think I'm just happy for her. And she, represents Southmoreland at her level and school. We're proud to see it. And I just wish her continued success. And she's always welcome back here. And like I said, it's just makes my heart and everybody here proud to see one of our own being that successful.
And again, you have a great perspective of Westmoreland County and WPIL softball, certainly with being on the committee. What does that entail?
Well, a lot of it is, each year, we set up the divisions you go through after they make all the changes for the classifications, mm-hmm. and we try to keep all the sections as even as possible when they move around. And then that's pretty much, it. You just try to set the rules. And then when it comes playoff time, that's where it's pretty exciting. And, you get down there and just try to make the brackets and the team seating as accurate as possible. And then, follow it through. It was a great experience last year. I did quite a few games, and I did it out at Seton Hill, and I got to watch some outstanding softball. That's the one part of it that I like. I get to see some of the teams that I hear about a lot, and even up the upper levels from the Connellsvilles and Penn Traffords and TJ and different teams, and it just amazes me to watch these young ladies and how competitive and how good they really are. So it's been a treat, and I really enjoy it. This year we're meeting Thursday just to go over the reschedule again and hopefully approve these sections, put it out, and then maybe we can get the schedule set up for next year and move forward with that.
Well, it's definitely a sport that I have a lot of respect for. This is our 10th year of broadcasting, so you break into broadcasting and you start broadcasting some sports that maybe you don't see very often, like wrestling and like softball. But man, it's a fast sport, and it's a lot of fun to watch in this area, isn't it?
It sure is, and I tell you, like you said, if you get a couple good teams there, that game could be over in like 45, 50 minutes.
Right.
It's like the girls are so quick. Some of these kids are way they pull those slap bunting and get on base. I used to think if they got a girl on, she got on first base, she was at third before you knew what happened, and then that might be the game. It was just so quick, and I enjoyed watching them. But like you said, it's fun.
I'll never forget the international tiebreaker, which I had no idea what that was. We were broadcasting Seton Hill softball years ago, and all of a sudden a girl was standing at second base, and I thought I was going crazy. I'm like, did I miss how did she get on base? I'm like checking my scorebook, and going nuts, and someone beside me said, hey, that's the international tiebreaker, and I don't even know off the top of my head, is it the 10th inning, or I'm trying to think now. When
I think for high school it is the 10th inning, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, yeah. So whatever it was for college or whatever it is, it was just so funny because I'm thinking, what did I miss here? And then someone explained to me what the international tiebreaker was. So, but yeah, it's a sport that's a lot of fun. And as you mentioned, the slap hitters, the drag bunts, and it's just such a quick game. And you got to feel the softball very quickly and get the ball to first base very quickly. And the girls, especially in this area, how well everyone defends. I mean, it really is a great sport.
And the pitchers, that's one thing we've been very fortunate.
Yeah.
And you come around Westmoreland County and look at some of the girls that can pitch. I mean, it's amazing to watch them, how the control and the speed, they're just so good at what they do.
Charlie, I think a few minutes ago you referenced a Chris when you talked about the assistant coaches. I'm guessing that's Chris Brunson. We had him on a handful of episodes ago here on the Quarantine Q&A. He's now the athletic director at Mount Pleasant. He started as the softball coach and ascended to that role. So is it fair to say you taught him everything that he knows?
Chris is a good guy, and I tell you, when he left, disappointed, but I knew he was only going to be a matter of a pit stop here with the caliber of kid he was, and I'm so happy for him. I told him sometimes this AD job's not everything it's cracked up to be, but he calls and we talk, and you know what, he's going to be successful, and just like his softball teams. I got an opportunity to watch him do his games a couple times last year, and it's always professional. He's always, a great guy to talk to, and he's going to do well, and I wish him a lot of luck too, and I'm glad to have been a part of his career.
And he was an accomplished baseball player growing up, playing collegiately. Baseball was obviously another sport that really was impacted by this COVID epidemic and the fact that the team was not able to take the field. Your thoughts on what to expect from the baseball team this year and any other spring sports that ultimately were canceled prematurely?
So, baseball was another one. We've been always working. We've been down a little bit over the last couple of years, but Al Govern had taken over, and this year's group of kids, they were really excited and ready to go. Talking to Al, he felt that, they were going to make a mark this year, get some winning games. Some of the kids that we had, were just ready to play, and that's the part. Again, it's just so disappointing to see, because I think we had another one of those teams that may have been one of those that nobody counted on right now that was able to go in there and make some damage and make some noise, because like I said, the kids were they were ready to play, and just disappointing to me. We had it's just frustrating to me when I even think about it, because I look forward to the kids, and I know they did all year, and especially the seniors. That's the one that really disappoints me, because you only get this opportunity once. It's not like college where you can say, okay, we'll grant you another year of eligibility and you can play next year. So I think soft baseball was going to be one of those teams that nobody counted in there that was going to do well. Our track team, that's the one too. I think our girls track team this year, talking to Dave, of course he does track too. They were loaded. They were. I think the girls track team was another one that was going to make a run maybe for the WPIL or the sections. Boys the same way. Last year both teams were there. You just never know with track. You can have kids that come out. We have kids that come out all of a sudden that do things that we didn't know were able to do, and you can have a great team. We had some fast kids there. Riley Conforti was on there. We had Brandon Peterson on that team. Those guys that all played basketball and football. Just great kids, great athletes. And, there's, again, where Dave started building that team up. He started talking to all those kids that played. He got them out for for track, and part of that was conditioning as well. When you get them out there to run and do whatever, he has them run around the track and do their thing, and then they go down and lift weights for 45 minutes or whatever. So I think our spring sports this year would have been – I was looking for us all to get into the playoffs again for most of them, from tennis to baseball to softball. But it's easy to say, without really about it. And again, you're winning football, you're winning basketball. Our boys and girls both made the playoffs in basketball. Our wrestling team made the playoffs. That winning way just kind of carries over. The kids want to keep winning, and I think the spring was going to be no different. So it's disappointing, but obviously we got to do what everybody else is in the same situation, and it's just move on and be the best we can.
And while the athletes are not able to complete their spring season, I know that probably has changed your schedule quite drastically. So while you're clearly at the school today, what has your schedule been like? What have you been doing during the stay-at-home orders?
Well, I usually come in a couple days a week if I can, and obviously with the schedules as they come out with the WPIL, I definitely want to make sure we have all that stuff up and date, because sometimes it's like who you can get a hold of first when you want to play, and make sure you fill that schedule. I always get a hold of our coaches, and we kind of set that down and decide who we want to try to get a hold of. So I kind of make sure all that's done, because I want to move forward and make sure we're not missing any beats with what we want to play. And then other than that, anything I see with our kids, I try to follow with the Twitter, like you guys, if you do anything, I put it out there on the websites. And then also with transportation now, it's another thing we start looking at next year already for how we're going to move the kids around. And if there is a next year, we're hoping the school opens on time. And that's like we've talked about even with fall sports. I'm seeing a lot of the stuff in the summer for especially like the 7-on-7 things for football, whether those are going to happen or not, changes a lot of things that the coaches and kids are going to be doing. So we're moving forward as a plan that it's going to open, and hopefully, if it doesn't, then we'll make a decision from there. But I'm looking forward to next year for the kids, and hopefully everything goes well.
How about personally, Charlie? Have you been able to catch up on anything, watch any Netflix or old sporting events or anything?
Well, it's funny you say that. My wife, my mother-in-law actually is in a nursing home now, and we have her home. So we were trying to remodel it, and over the years I had no time to really get to it. So one thing over the last few weeks, I've made a lot of progress updating the kitchen and doing some work. I said I almost rather go back to work the way my wife keeps me busy.
Right. So when you're going to see, when you're in the fall, when hopefully everything returns back to normal, you're going to say, okay, maybe this is where I want to be.
Right. So, but it's, it's nice in a way to get things, like you said, some things done, and, be home with your wives or whatever, but at the same time, it feels weird sitting around not having anything to do here as far as sports. And it's always winter, spring sports, and I'm sure all the other ADs say it, like this weather outside now, I'd be sitting here thinking, oh my goodness, it's the nice time of year, but it's also one of the hardest times of the year as far as getting your games all scheduled and in. So when you have this kind of weather, and it's been a pretty wet spring again. So.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Charlie, certainly this is a banner year for Southmoreland. I think you set the bar pretty high, so we'll see if future school years can live up to the expectations.
Okay. Like I said, I thank my community and the kids. It's not me, it's them. They're the ones that come out there every day and do it, and the coaches and their parents that support them and do their things. And all I can do is hopefully give them what they need and praise and enjoy it with them, and it's really fun.
Thanks so much for doing this. Hopefully, as Dan said, we'll see you in the fall season sooner rather than later.
Thanks, Charlie.
I appreciate what you guys do. I really like seeing you guys out there. It makes it nice. The kids enjoy it too.
Thank you.
Charlie Swink, the athletic director at Southmoreland. That'll do it for this edition of the Quarantine Q&A here on the Westmoreland Sports Network. For my co-host Dan Flickinger, Sean Meyer signing off. We'll catch you again on a future episode right here on Westmoreland Sports.